Welcome, everyone, to our episode 26 of the podcast Cultivating a New Generation. In today's episode, we are going to talk about rewiring your brain to succeed, and we are going to go beyond the messages, the patterns, the beliefs that are implied in taking over our brain and why we keep limiting ourselves. Sometimes messages from parents, sometimes they are from childhood, they are patterns, they are behaviors, they are traditions, just to stay in our mind, and they leave us predisposed to an emotional load, to be more sensitive to pain, or even to be predisposed to rumination and those cycling thoughts that are just repeating in our minds, creating anxiety, creating depression, and all of those things are the ones that are going to be cycling still if you don't do something. We often don't seem to understand that our childhood stage, even from the earliest stages in our womb or in the womb of our mothers, are critical stages to acquire most of our behaviors. And that is also something that is an epigenetic evidence. Patterns and toxic emotional cycles are passed through you inside the womb of your mom. Moreover, many emotional interactions, neglecting emotional behaviors, or emotional attachment issues are being overlooked when in fact the source of many of adolescent and adulthood emotional instability is produced in those stages. That's why many times it's difficult for people to realize what is happening inside of their minds. It's just because it was ingrained when they were really in the womb, or they were children, or they will neglected something when they needed. Because the development of the immune system is not completed at birth, but rather it continues throughout childhood. Environmental stimulation in childhood years is extremely important and can have profound effects on the immune system. We also know that due to the fact that giving your babies lactating years for at least 2 years, that's the best way to transfer them with immunity, with those immunoglobulins that they need, and with all those immune messengers. Experimental animal models have shown that early life stress can affect later immune functioning, but observational human studies are needed to test if childhood trauma does affect later in the immune functioning in ordinary people. Below, we review some key papers, and I'm going to just tell, and we are going to discuss about these journals that have investigated the association between traumatic experiences in childhood, generally defined as pre-pubertal exposure, and immune abnormalities. Childhood and adolescent years have such an important windows. Those are the most important time periods that all humans have in order to receive the epigenetic marks from the environment and, of course, from the things that they are being surrounded with. That's why we have to be very careful with those stages, because many of these epigenetic traits and marks will be imprinted during that time period. We have investigated the association between childhood trauma and plasma inflammation of biomarkers in at least, there was a study with 1,037 members of the Dunedin Multidisciplinary Health and Development Study, and these study members have been followed since their birth in Dunedin, New Zealand, from 1972 to 1973 through repeated waves of assessment until adult life with very low attrition. This design enabled people to undertake a longitudinal prospective assessment of maltreatment experiences in the first decade of life. As study members grew up, they include behavioral observation, parental reports, and retrospective reports by study members once they reach adulthood. Furthermore, what they observe is that at age 32 years, we measure the plasma inflammation biomarkers, which are reactive protein, fibrinogen, and white blood cells count. And then they found that cumulative exposure to those childhood maltreatment was associated with significant and graded elevation in inflammation levels 20 years later. So that's an amazing discovery, and how this is a big call of attention of how childhood stages or the adolescent stage can really mark people until they are adults in the immune system, in the markers, and in the inflammatory response. Therefore, this is a call of attention that should encourage parents, if they are young, to assess and be more informed about the consequence of not fostering a nurturing style that allow the child to be in a safe space, to be emotionally cared, and to allow him or her to have a healthier outlook since he or she begins the story of her life and is allowed to finish, to polish and to assemble all the immunological and neural machinery to have a more prosperous future in any of the endeavors that he or she chooses after in his or her life. So these are the things that we can start doing more proactively with our children, to start taking a safe environment, but also to start allowing them to push the limits and to identify their emotions, and also to train them to, even though you might think that they don't understand, they really, really understand you if you explain everything slowly. And if you just tell them that the thoughts that they have sometimes, or the dreams that they can have, they are not always real, and they are not many times their thoughts, so they don't have to identify. Or if a teacher or if a classmate tells them something, you just try to make conversation to take out the truth and to start helping them to understand what is happening in their emotions. How can you start then diminishing or even regenerating the damage that you might suffer earlier? However, not everything is lost. In spite of all this evidence, if you were an abused child, or if you had a rough start during your childhood years, or even at the adolescent stage, you are still on time to heal the wounds. You are still able to repair many of these neural and immunological pathways through an amazing magical process of brain plasticity, which applies either to neural pathways or to your immune functions. Why is this able to happen? Because we have the amazing power of reversing the effects in the way we shape the new environment. That has been also researched and proved that if we start changing our environment, we start nurturing ourselves with the right kind of mindset and patterns, we are going to be able to overcome all of those epigenetic marks that we have when we were children. Depending on the years, depending on the damage, and many of the traits, marks, or deteriorating processes that your childhood or teenage years left in you, you are still on time to do the work, to all start doing to allow your body to rewire and many of the pathways that could have been damaged during those moments, taking back the control of your life. You are not at the expense of your past, and you are not, of course, defined by your past. You can try to rewrite your story of emotional damage and allowing yourself to see it from an observer point, detaching you from the situation. You are not in those moments anymore. So now you can reflect on what happened and you can start allowing a new story, a new step of the pathway proven to allow your brain to start reversing the effects of such damage. So we can just walk again those paths and start healing ourselves. As mentioned earlier in the research, pro-inflammatory cytokines such as IL-10, which is interleukin-10 and is an inflammatory marker, which are the immunity messengers, and lipopolysaccharide, which is called LPS, also acts as a triggering substance for inflammatory pathways and release during the trauma experiences. To counteract the effect of these toxic messengers, you can do exercise. You can have a healthier, nutritious behavior and a spiritual practice such as meditation. And those simple things that you can do in your life have demonstrated that allow your body to start releasing healing cytokines such as IL-1, IL-2, 3, and 4. Additionally, there are other anti-inflammatory messengers that are going to be released in the presence of these behaviors, such as BDNF and glucocorticoids that allow our body to be repaired, the immune system to be replenished and rewire your neural pathways, restoring some, if not all, of the damage that was produced due to those emotional abuse stages and childhood severe experiences. Glucocorticoid actions also involve multiple mechanisms besides direct and indirect regulation of gene expression, from directly stimulating glutamate release, which is a neurotransmitter, to indirectly inhibit via stimulation of endocannabinoid secretion and regulation of calcium sequestration and free radical formation via the mitochondria. So what is happening with this process, with this biochemical cascade of healing actions? Glucocorticoids, in the amount that they are released through exercise, meditation, and eating healthier, they are creating signals internally that are going to release minerals, and they are going to allow your mitochondria, which are your powerhouses, to start producing energetic compounds that are going to clean many of the epigenetic markers, such as NAD, which is a carrier of energy, in addition to also be a coenzyme that is going to help in the speed of the reaction processes to clean those epigenetic marks. Positive effects of these glucocorticoids on cellular function range from enhancement of adaptive function by acute stress to promote the calcium buffering in the mitochondria. Why the mitochondria needs this mineral, the calcium? It is an extremely important mineral because it enhances the connection between the enzyme and the coenzyme, and that's why it is called a cofactor. In those processes, you are going to be able to enhance the production of these compounds, these coenzymes named NAD or FAD, which are just energetic compounds, carriers, and coenzymes that are going to help many other enzymes in your DNA, in your genes, to clean the epigenetic marks. And they will protect you also for post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms that you might have, without having to depend on these pharmacological drugs that they are just showing off every day in the news, in the advertisements, or any type of synthetic aids. Your body is able to create new signals, new pathways, new wiring mechanisms, and heal the damage that you might have suffered if you are able just to align yourself with the right kind of mindset, with your physical, mental, and emotional health that allows you to have a different paradigm, a different perspective, a different outlook of your life. A healthier outlook will be able to start reprogramming your mind and your body, and of course, start generating a profound impact in those epigenetic imprints. What can you do then to start designing a healthier outlook? Your mind is your hard drive. Your heart will be your cleaning software. Therefore, in order to achieve a deeper cleaning strategy, we will have to align what we are feeling with what we know we can think, remember, and able to reconstruct from the damage. So you are going to start the healing process. So get ready to start these kind of practical tips to heal your mind, your emotional trauma, and your body. Our mind is not always the most reliable source to interpret, perceive, and appreciate the damage that we could have suffered. However, we will try to make it as objective as possible to give us a draft, a blueprint of where to start. And therefore, during this stage, you will be placing yourself as a third party. You are an observer, and you will be able to see the things without judgment. Even if you still have emotions, you can detach from the emotions and you can start doing the exercise by writing, by journaling. This step is the most critical in terms of being as specific as possible in your draft, and also it will be very likely that the most painful things are going to come out, and you will be reliving some of those experiences. That is why you should try to detach from the emotion as much as possible. You can see yourself as a reference point, as an outsider, and you can even call the person that you are trying to recall with another name, as if you were narrating a story. As much as possible, try to see it as if you were telling the story of someone else. Once you have drafted the experience with all the details that you might gather from your mind recollection, you will find out as much as possible what was the trigger for the situation in terms of the offender point of view. So you will be able to see the people, the person that do harm to you, either in the past trauma history or in the emotional trigger of the situation. That person, you will be able to see the story of their lives and see it as an unidentified pattern. You are not trying to justify anything, and you are just trying to create a more coherent scenario of why it happened that will allow you to see the things with a more empathetic perspective and a compassionate heart feeling. From here, and by looking at the background triggering effects that the offender had, you be able to generate a connection with your heart and to see the things with a forgiveness outlook. That will allow you to release some of the emotional load that you have been carrying. Remember that whenever we build up, we swallow, or we keep stuck in the past due to some emotional trauma, the only ones that are doing harm to ourselves is us. the other person, the other people that produce the damage is just living their story, their consequences. So you cannot do anything about that, but you can understand that they also suffer a lot of trauma, a lot of emotional wounds, and then you will be able to pass through, to move along. So next, you will allow yourself to rewrite the experience with a healing perspective, meaning you will be able to change the narrative of the situation. You will ingrain a new story with a positive outlook, with a positive experience, completely changing the environment and the scenario of what happened. And here you can be, and you can allow yourself to be more empathetic, and you want, in order to be able to rewire the experience now in your brain, a compassionate heart, a more empathetic situation will be able to rewire your neural connections. This means that you will do an effort to stay with the positive scenario and release as much as possible the negative experience, which should be less difficult once you were able to see that the offender had a previous history of abuse, of neglecting issues, or emotional severe experiences as well. And let me just tell you an example. If you had an emotional trauma due to one of your parents, you can just try to understand their story, try to figure out and find out some of the pain that they have and the life that they experience, so that you can understand why they replicate the pain, or why do they do a lot of damage. Oftentimes, we will try to assign guilt, but we are just predisposed to blame people without being empathetic and compassionate. And most of the times, people that behave as offenders are the ones that they need more attention, and they have a history, they have a background of pain, they have emotional hardship, which has been accumulating over years, and not be in a permissive state or justifying their actions. We are not justifying anything. We are just trying to understand why they did it. And we might never arrive to the reason, but we might understand why they did it. So by having compassion, by releasing those emotional wounds, by having empathy, and by forgiving them, you will align your heart. You will detach and get away from that emotional load. You will be able to feel lighter, and your heart and your brain will be the most useful tools that will allow you to thrive during this journey towards letting go of the issue. And I don't know if you have to do it one time, two times, three times. I don't know if you need still support, but these exercises, these practical tips are going to really allow you to heal the story. Extracting those most powerful positive sentences, statements, when you were doing the writing exercise, will allow you to start feeling positive, to start feeling healing emotions. And that will allow you to be able to create a new narrative that will stay with you. This is the one that is going to stay, and will finally rewire your brain through the path of empathy and compassion, and you will be able to let go those negative emotions. Finally, allowing your mind to create the habit of repeating the positive phrases and sentences describing the experiences that you want, and crossing off the toxic messages that you have. That is the end point of these exercises. Those will allow you to form the new habit of the positive emotions, the new habit of the healing pattern. Therefore, your healing process begins in the present moment. It doesn't begin in the past. The past is just a reference, and that creates an opening up of your heart and allowing the connection with your brain and synchronizing them. That's the best and easiest way to do it. And it will allow you to be in a grateful state for all the things, for all the moments, for all the people, because you were not going to be the person that you are if you haven't suffered those things. So you will start having synchronicity that will allow you and propel you to thrive, gain traction, build resilience, and connecting with a field of new probabilities with your future, with the thoughts that you already drafted, with the idea that clearly detailed when writing new behaviors, you will want to incorporate them as part of your thinking. Now, these sets of steps will allow yourself to be constant, to be disciplined, and most of all, to create a compromise with yourself. And then you will have no doubts that you will achieve the installation of this pattern. Just be patient, be kind with you. This is just as a muscle that you have to exercise, and just try to detach and receive now those messages that you also take for a lot of years, and try to see them as now an exercise to clean them up, every time you do the exercise. And also, you have to internalize the positive things. Every time you do the exercise, every time you release pain, every time you detach from the emotion, you will be able to repair the damage and the suffering over and over again. Thus, now, if you really want to heal, if you really desire to have a different outlook, a different future, a different life, you will need to be constant, repetitive, diligently, patiently, and kindly installing the new software of your brain. Just as a computer software that once it is released, you receive probably 10 or 20 updates so that it starts to work smoothly and much more efficiently, your brain needs at least 3 to 4 months to install this new version of the software. And yes, you will have to update it many times with a strong will, with a strong outlook, with confidence that eventually that kind of pattern of thought is the one that will stay with you. Remember that the neurons need to rewire, need to fire together, need to repeat that cascade of impulses in order to create the connection, in order to sustain the connection. How many times do you have to repeat a path when you are driving to a place to remember it by heart, let's say? A lot of times, at least 5, 6, or 7 times. Well, this happens with your brain as well. If you repeat this exercise over and over again, if you detach from the emotions, you will be able to start the forgiving process and start with an empathetic mind and heart. And even if you have some days where the previous software still have some bugs to reappear in your mind, use your antivirus to dissolve it, which is all your grateful thoughts, which is all your compassion, which is the empathy arsenal of positive emotions that you have been generating with these exercises to counteract the effect of the toxic set of patterns. Don't be afraid, don't be desperate. It takes time, it takes repetition, but believe me, once you are enrolled in the path of doing the right things, of cleaning your life of toxicity, you will be finding a much more supportive environment with new people. You will start attracting a different kind of people, new endeavors, new doors that will start to be open just because you decided to change and you are doing the job and you are showing up every day. In summary, it's completely worth it for you. All the work required to update your old toxic software and start removing all those viruses that keep sabotaging your life, that will keep making you feel that life is not punishing you at all. So you are on the right track. You are creating the things when you least expect them, and they are going to appear. Something comes up and triggers your mind, you know what to do. You know how to detach from those thoughts and those emotions and turn your memory into something that you will really be able to envision yourself winning. You are not destined to repeat any patterns. You are not wired to repeat the stories. You are not wired to stay in the darkness, suffering and playing the victim for the rest of your life. In order to be a protagonist of your own role in life and start being the star of your movie and start creating the real movie that you want, you will have to align your body, your mind to act as a successful, wealthy, and abundant and healthy person. And the more you are disciplined and constant to do it, the faster you will witness the amazing result of reprogramming your mind to succeed. So that's the key points. Those are the messages that we many times need to ingrain in our minds. Everything can be changed, everything can be reversed while you are still here. Thank you very much for paying attention. Thank you for listening to this episode. We will listen to each other on the next one. Have a wonderful day. Bye.